practice does not make perfect. Practice with a night of sleep is what makes perfect, because you come back the next day and you're 20 to 30% better in terms of your skilled performance than where you were at the end of your practice session the day before. Sleep is the greatest legal performance enhancing drug that most people are probably neglecting in sport.
Hey guys, today we're talking about how to gain your focus. The video is all around a program called Kovaaks, which is an aim trainer on PC. And yes, I realize that there's a million videos out there already about Kovaaks. Things like play this game, make your aim perfect, become an aim god, yada, yada, yada. And yes, it definitely helped my aim. But when I was trying to decide whether or not I should make this video, I watched a ton of those videos and realized that none of them actually mentioned the one main thing that I found a benefit from. So I still figured it was worth it to show you. And that is exactly this. It helped me with one of my biggest issues ever. In chaotic moments where I started to get really flustered and panic, my aim would go to shit and I could not focus. This game helped me so much with that one aspect, and I learned a lot of things along the way, so I really wanted to share this in case there's other people who could resonate with the same thing. So let's jump right in, shall we? Alright, so why did I start looking for something such as Kovaaks or an aim trainer? Well, it all began with an injury to the tendons in my wrists, preventing me from being able to use controllers anymore. I was forced to learn mouse and keyboard. Right around this time, Fortnite was starting to get big, and I jumped on that bandwagon. I thought I'm naturally good at gaming. I'll pick it up on mouse and keyboard, no problem. And I found that that was in fact the case most of the time. When I was relaxed or focused, if I had a single target, if I was expecting their movement, yeah, I often hit my shots. In fact, I was very proud of how I was playing. But there was one major issue. Every single time I got flustered, my aim went to shit. In fact, this issue was even deeper. I often found when there were a ton of things happening all at once, it was like I couldn't focus, almost as if everything was a blur. I don't really know how to explain it, but the more I thought of it, I realized this was happening to me both in and outside of video gaming. In fact, my most relatable example is ice hockey. I'm not playing it right now during the COVID situation, but whenever I'd be in an enemy zone, if a lot of shit was going on at once and I had to make decisions very quickly, I felt like I couldn't always focus on where my teammates were relative to the opposing team in order to execute the best possible play at that moment. I became increasingly frustrated with this issue, and I started taking to Google. I started looking for things like how to focus when a lot's going on, and eventually I went down this path of crosshair focus. Well, lo and behold, I heard about Kovaaks. I figured, hey, my aim could use some work. I'll give this thing a shot. Well, I'm here to tell you that practicing Kovaaks not only helped my aim in game substantially, but it almost completely eliminated my inability to focus or make decisions in chaotic moments where I used to get flustered. Of course, I have to preface this with a disclaimer though, that Kovaaks will not make you an aim god. Aim does not always trump game sense, let alone the other mechanical skills that gaming requires. A lot of things come into play here. Good aim can certainly save your ass in bad situations, but at the end of the day, it's the combination of your aim, your game sense, your non-aim mechanics, your genetics. I'm sorry to say it, dedicated and concentrated practice is definitely your best method at becoming the best player that you can be, but genetics will always play a role, and that's okay. But let's jump into setting this thing up. Again, I mentioned this program is only for PC, and if you don't have the Steam application already, you're gonna need to Google that, go to their front page, look up top, there's a button called Install Steam. Once you're in, go to the search bar under the Store tab, type in Kovaaks, and this is what it'll look like. Once you've downloaded it and you've started it up, we'll talk about the features. Now that you're in here, on the left-hand side, it'll show you a bunch of scenarios that you can play. There's like over 3,000 of them, and we'll be touching on that in a moment. But first off, you got to figure out what sensitivity you want to use. So click on Game Options. At the top, you're looking at sensitivity. Mine says Overwatch right now because I'm currently playing Destiny 2. A lot of games out there use common engines for calculating how sensitivity works, and in this case, that's the preset I need to choose for Kovaaks. My horizontal sensitivity is locked with my vertical sensitivity, and it's set to 9 because in-game I use 9. Also realize that if you use an ADS multiplier in-game, you need to account for that here. My ADS multiplier is 1.0, so I'm all good on that front. You can implement toggle zoom in this program, but I won't be digging into that feature today. Then you have your FOV measurement. That's really important. I currently set my FOV in D2 to 104, so you want to make sure that that matches because your sensitivity is relative to your FOV. Generally, increasing your FOV means you can see more, but it also slows your sensitivity. When you go down in FOV, you have larger targets, but your sensitivity is faster and you can see less all at once. And then the rest of the stuff at the bottom isn't as important for this video, but I do encourage you to play around with it. There's a section on keybinds which I won't run through, but I wanted to show you just so I could highlight what the reset session button is. Just a quicker way, if you're in the middle of a session and you want to just restart and keep going without having to hit the escape key, then hitting the restart button. I set mine to caps lock, so it's just really easy for me to hit and keep going. And all the other sections here on the left-hand side of game options are really good for setting up visuals, like what color you want your target to be. Do you want them to have a different colored head versus body? What do you want the walls to be? SMG. I'm not going to dive into that right now because it's fairly intuitive, but do let me know if you have any questions at all in the comments. So now that you're all set up, you've got 3,000 plus scenarios to choose from. Which ones should you do? Well, I can't go through all of them, and I can't tell you that the ones that I'm going to say are the absolute best for you, but I will say that they were a fantastic starting point for me and that I encourage you to continue to try other ones while you learn. What I found most important to me was differentiating click timing exercises to tracking exercises. And what I mean by that is sometimes you only have to click your target once and you have multiple targets in different spots on the screen and you just need to click them. That's considered click timing exercise. An in-game translation to that would be like a sniper or a shotgun, albeit both of those require a bit of tracking before you eventually decide to click that button. However, on the flip side, an AR or an SMG would be examples of core tracking exercises, something that I have to follow while I'm clicking my mouse the entirety of its life, and working on both of them translated to the best results for me in game. However, at the beginning, I wasn't really sure if I should focus more on one or the other, so I actually started doing some research on that, and I found this guide by a gentleman named Aimer7. If you haven't heard of him, he's an aim coach that has worked with a lot of pros in many different games, such as Fortnite, for example. Definitely worth Googling his name. While I throw up some scenario examples in the background, it'll be fairly obvious which ones are click time and which ones are tracking. I'm going to talk about how often I practiced, how long I practiced, and add on a few other factors that I noticed were having huge impacts on my performance in Kovaaks and in gaming. To start off, my first scenario was a massive slap to the face. It was a wake-up call. I thought I was decent. I was wrong. I did terrible. But as I continued to practice, I want to talk about that issue of focus because that's where I started to see the improvement. All of a sudden, I was finding myself in-game consciously seeing my target and thinking about it as if I was in Kovaaks. I don't really know how to explain why that happens, but it's almost like practicing in Kovaaks taught me how to focus on that one target and forget about everything else that was going on around me. In game, I started seeing my targets in chaotic and flustering situations the way I was seeing a target in Kovaaks. I was suddenly developing this ability to focus on my target. That is by far the biggest improvement I had with Kovaaks. It's not like it was developing god-tier muscle reflexes or this superb ability for my hand to coordinate the mouse and the crosshair on screen, but more so that I could hone in on my target. When I'm calm and not panicking, I'm able to put the crosshair on the target. So the end result ended up being better aim, especially in chaotic situations. I cannot stress this enough. My aim smoothness when I compared it to old VODs and current VODs was so much better. And what you end up seeing is this cycle of improvement and confidence increase, because that's one of the first non-video game factors that I wanted to talk about that have an impact on your performance in game. Confidence. Going into a situation with the utmost confidence is extremely critical. Kovaaks started to give me this confidence. The more I started to see my scores improve in Kovaaks, the higher my confidence level was when I fired up a game. Suddenly those moments where your teammates screaming, "Clutch your kick, motherfucker," were going in my favor. All right, so how much should you practice? Well, that's going to vary based on the person. I think that for a very casual gamer, this is still beneficial because it's going to help them panic less in those chaotic situations, but they might not need to practice as much to try and achieve this masterful aim in addition to that, whereas someone else who's extremely determined to improve their aim might spend a lot more time on this. And then you've got to find that healthy balance between in-game practice versus out-of-game practice. With my situation, working full-time, trying to work on a stream, trying to grow content, it only allowed me a little bit of time to do this, and I still found it to be helpful. I would always run the challenge mode on a game type. They usually vary from 30 seconds to 2 minutes, but most of the time they're just 1 minute on the dot. I would do 6 to 8 scenarios a day, and each scenario I would do 5 to 7 times. On a day where I practice the least amount, I might do 6 scenarios 5 times each. That's totaling to 30 straight minutes of practice, and of course that might take 35 to 40 minutes of actual time. And if I felt like I had a bit more time, I might do, say, 8 scenarios where I do it 7 or 8 times each, and that would total to about an hour of actual practice, taking roughly an hour and 15 minutes of my time. You might think this isn't even nearly enough, and that's okay. You might think this is overkill. That's okay. But if you're someone who plays Battle Royale games, for example, you can play 3 straight hours of a Battle Royale and only get like 12 straight minutes of actual gunfight experience. Why not achieve 12 minutes of aim practice in only 15 minutes of time rather than 3 hours? But the amount still does matter. Now, I would do this every single day, but I also like to think that you should treat this just like working out. You don't go in and do curls to work on your biceps 7 days a week, every single day, 3 hours a day. You're going to have negative progress. There's a reason why a lot of workout programs have 4-week segments and a break. Then they have a 4-week segment and then a break. break, or during the week, you might work on your back on a Monday, and then you might work on your chest on the Tuesday, and then you might work on something else on the Wednesday. You might do legs, then upper body. All of these are to allow your muscles to recover and come back even stronger. It's no different with the brain. In particular, I was monitoring my performance relative to what I was doing those days because I was curious. 3 things stood out for having a massive impact on my performance. And honestly, they could all be grouped under one common word: health. Number 1, my ergonomics. There's an amazing video by a gentleman named RonRamboKim who talks all about this, and I'm just going to post that link in the description so you can learn all about it. Number 2, my nutrition and my stress levels. I found that when I had a crazy stressful week at work, my Kovaaks scores were shit. And although I won't say that those are 100% a linear correlation, I do believe that whenever I was eating healthier and I had less stress in my life, it absolutely makes a difference. And last but not least, I actually want to reference a clip from a Joe Rogan podcast all about sleeping. This is a bit of a 2-part piece, and the first is getting a good sleep. Whenever I had a really good sleep the night before, I consistently felt fresh and often broke my records in Kovaaks. On stretches where I had a shit sleep 2 to 3 days in a row, for example, I couldn't even come close to my records. Now, with everything out there, there's anomalies where you might break a record on a low sleep, but in terms of consistency, I found that sleep was very important. Matthew Walker, a professor of neuroscience and psychology at the University of California, talks all about how not only is sleep important to perform, but it can actually be better than practice itself. That's right. Scientific studies have shown that getting a good night's sleep after a short practice session can actually be better than practicing for longer and getting a bad sleep.
All the time, and maybe even trying to work out patterns while I was sleeping.
That's exactly the evidence that we have now. As if the brain is actually, and in fact it is, it's replaying the exact same sequence, the memory sequence that it was learning whilst it was awake. It's replaying, but at a speed that is 20 times faster. And we've done studies with motor skill learning, critical for athletic performance. Practice does not make perfect. Practice with a night of sleep is what makes perfect, because you come back the next day and you're 20 to 30% better in terms of your skilled performance than where you were at the end of your practice session the day before. Sleep is the greatest legal performance enhancing drug that most people are probably neglecting in sport.
All right, I hope that was helpful to you. I recognize that you can't download this for free and that you have to purchase it, but there are other free to download aim trainers out there. You just got to go looking for them. And I believe they would have the same effect. The only catch is they might have different scenarios. Anyways, to end the video off, I'm actually going to just leave up a screen with all my scores from when I first started Kovaaks and what my records are. It's just to give you a bit of a window to see where you're at if you do decide to move forward with trying it out. But at the end of the day, I feel like this is something similar to golf where you really shouldn't be comparing yourself to other people's scores. And the best way to improve is just to focus on your own numbers and keep at it. The screen will be up for a couple of seconds. That way you can just screenshot it. And other than that, I guess,
have a great day.